Right, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and get things kicked off here. Thanks everybody for your time and for joining our webinar. Jordan, thanks for hosting the logistics side of what we're doing. My name is Craig Kaiser, and I am the president and co-founder of a company called LandGate. And we are hosting this webinar today in hopes that we can provide you guys some information about general questions, general inquiries for solar leasing across the United States. Real quick summary of LandGate and what we do. We're an open marketplace and analytics company. So landowners across the United States can go to landgate.com, look up your properties and get analytical information about the potential for solar leasing on your property, wind leasing, carbon credits, oil and gas leasing, all of those natural resources. And then we provide a marketplace. It's a completely free marketplace. We are not brokers. Let me say that once again, very clear. We are not brokers. We do not take commissions on deals. We do not charge fees for listings. You manage your own listing, you put it up on the website, and folks who want to offer leases to you for your property will reach out directly to you, and you guys can interact with them from a buyer and seller perspective. Again, we are a platform for data analytics and more marketplace. So welcome to the webinar. We do these every couple of weeks, and usually they're different topics. Today, we're going to be talking about solar, but we have previously recorded webinars where we talk about carbon credits or oil and gas minerals or rent payments on solar panels, all of these types of things. So we really strive to provide as much data and information out there to landowners, land professionals, anybody really dealing with land in the United States of America. We pride ourselves of kind of being the ultimate source for land values, land use, natural resources. We are kind of the ultimate source for that. So without further ado, I do want to kind of handle something very quickly. This is being recorded, so at any time you guys want to come back and hear some of the explanations that I'm going to be talking through with some of these questions, you are going to get this recording sent to you in an email. This webinar will be hosted on our website and some of the resources that we have there. So that's number one. Number two, at any time, if you have additional questions, we're going to be going through about 10 or 12 typical questions that we've seen in our 8 years of running as LandGate, what landowners typically are asking about when it comes to solar energy leasing on their property. If you have additional questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, put them in the chat. Jordan is on board with us, as so is Michaela. So ladies, if you could, whenever you have a question coming in, you need to stop me from going on about whatever it is I might be rambling about at the time, feel free to jump in, put your questions in there, and we try to keep this as, kind of open dialogue. This webinar is for you all to get as much information as possible. So that's it in a nutshell. Open dialogue, open to additional questions, but we're going to go ahead and kick some things off. Now, these are questions that either Michaela, myself, Brooke Gooding, Thomas Villanueva, the folks who are answering phone calls from landowners and land professionals on a day in and day out basis, these are the typical questions that we usually see from folks who are just getting started and trying to learn a little bit about solar energy on their property. This is probably one of the most common questions right here, and it's how much land do solar developers look for? We used to, up until about 18 to 24 months ago, the back of the envelope number was about 40 acres. 20 to 40 acres was the minimum. That has changed. That's changed quite significantly. What has happened over the last, I'd say 12 to 24 months, is that there is a less of a push for these very, very large solar facilities where you have miles and miles of panels. And you're starting to see some of these developers really push into what's called behind the meter or community level solar. Now, those smaller solar facilities, we've seen on average across the United States, anywhere from 5 to 15 acres for those types of facilities. Those are going in and around, suburban developments on the outskirts of cities and towns, things like that. So on the small side, we are starting to see parcels around the 5 to 15 acre being picked up for community and behind the meter solar applications. On the commercial side of solar, where you have these very, very large developers, to name a few, NextEra Energy, Light Source BP, Duke Energy, some of these very large renewable energy developers, they're looking for the largest tracts that they can find. So anywhere from 40 acres up to tens of thousands of acres is what they're typically looking for. Now, very, very few folks in the United States or across the world own 10,000 acres plus of land. But the point here is, if you have really anything over 5 to 15 acres in the right spot, which the next question typically is, well, is my land in a good spot? And LandGate will tell you if you have property that's in a good spot. It's going to help define how many acres can you actually put solar panels on, how much wetlands do you have, flood zones, how much of the topography is too steep or to have solar panels on. So LandGate will give you those analytics, and that buildable acreage number on your parcel is really the one that you want to focus on there. So that's kind of what you're looking for. On the small community solar side, 5 to 15 acres. And then on the larger commercial side, you know, anything above 20 to 40 acres and up are in the right spot is something that's going to catch the eye of a lot of solar developers. Another very, very common question: how long are these leases typically? And people need to understand how solar leases are structured in the first place. So let's cover that very, very quickly. A solar lease, wind energy lease, they're very similar in the way that they're structured, in that you essentially have two different terms in that lease. For solar energy leasing, let's use an example here that Michaela has a family farm of 250 acres in southern Minnesota, and she's interested in leasing her property out for solar energy, and she's wanting to know, well, how long is my land going to be encumbered? The first portion of her solar lease is what's called the option period. So an energy company is going to offer Michaela and her family a lease, and they're going to say, okay, Michaela, we are going to spend anywhere from 3 to 5 years putting together all of the logistical components of actually building the solar farm. Now, we need a commitment from you and your family that you're not going to go and sign a contract with another solar energy developer out there during this time. So we're going to go ahead and begin a lease with you. And we're going to have the option, that energy company is going to have the option to continue that lease, to continue the due diligence and logistical process to get an actual working solar farm on her property. And that process on average takes about 3 to 5 years. Now, that energy company is not encumbering your land, likely doesn't even have any type of equipment on your property at this point. They will pay you an amount, but it's not the very large amount of when the panels actually come. Again, that's the option period. During this time, they're putting together permitting processes, they're meeting with the county commissioners, making sure all the regulatory components of being able to put solar panels on the property are being completed. They're going to file for something called an interconnection queue. Can they actually, if they build solar panels there, can they put those electrons onto the grid, and can the grid accept those electrons? Is there enough what's called capacity in the transmission lines to be able to take more energy? So they're going to be doing all of these studies, and that's what that 3 to 5 year component, that option period, that's what we're talking about there. Now, the proper lease component of the solar lease payments begins typically when construction begins on the project. From that point on, your payments go up significantly in value, and that's typically when those lease payments that you're negotiating 3 to 5 years prior, that's when those payments are going to start. Again, you should be, if you do it correctly, and you have you put a listing up on LandGate and you have 5 or 10 different folks wanting to be interested in your property, you select a good developer to partner with, you'll get paid through the option period, but your payments significantly increase once construction begins and they start encumbering your property. That second portion of the lease, when they start constructing on the property, they've installed panels and they start producing energy, those leases typically go from anywhere from 20 to 30 years. Depends on who the developer is. It depends on what part of the country you're in. But it's very typical to see a 20-year what we call a primary term of that lease. Many of these leases will have options to extend that period. So a typical lease would look like 3 to 5 years initial option period. You'll get paid $25 per acre per year. You're still farming, you're still ranching, you're still hunting the property, doing whatever it is you're doing there. And then once construction starts, payments significantly go up, anywhere from $500 per acre per year to $3,000 per acre per year. And that $500 to $3,000 per acre per year lasts for about 20 years. And then that developer will say, well, maybe we'll put a couple of option periods at the end. You'll typically see maybe 2 5-year options to continue the project down the road, maybe 2 10-year options, depending on who the developer is. So from the time you sign that lease term could go from anywhere from 30 to 50 years. Now, keep in mind, this is what a lot of folks do not understand, and we'll talk about this when we get to the very last question, about what you can do once you actually get that cash flow on your property. Not only what you can do, but what you should really, really think through and consider once you have the cash flow, is that the lease is not guaranteed. So back to the example of Michaela's family, 250 acres in southern Minnesota, gone through the whole process, have gone through the option period, 3 to 5 years. Construction has started, and there's been solar panels on her property for 2 years. She's been paid. There is no guarantee that that lease will go for 30 or 40 or 50 years. If something happens further down the road and the project, let's say a catastrophic storm and the prices and the project's no longer economic, there is no guarantee that they will rebuild the solar project. Now, we didn't put it in this question, but I know a lot of people are thinking about it. Well, who's left with the burden at the end of this lease? You have all these panels on your property. There's likely some inverters, some buried cables. At this point, almost every lease that people see using our platform, every single lease will have what's called a reclamation clause on it. So there is no burden to the landowner. There is no cost to the landowner to develop the property, to level the property, to put in cables. There's no cost. That is completely on the company, the developer that you and your family would be working with. The reclamation, there's also zero cost. There is no cost, no liability whatsoever to the landowner. So that's obviously something that you want to be looking for through the lease. And again, huge disclaimer, we are not attorneys. This is not legal advice, but this is just high level things to be noted for when you're looking through your lease. The reclamation is on the developer. That cost is on the developer. So if something happens to the project in year 25 and the panels are no longer productive, then that burden to reclaim the property and bring it back to its original state from the time they showed up, that burden is completely on the developer. Another question is what happens if that company goes bankrupt? At this point, every state that I'm aware of in the United States requires all these developers, in order to get a permit and get through the regulatory process, they have to be bonded. So even if they have something where financially the company is no longer operating, there is the bond account that they have to post with a regulatory body, where if something like that does happen, there's still enough money there to reclaim all the properties and bring it back to its original state. I see that there's one in the Q&A. Let me see. Hello, how can I get in touch with those developers 5 to 15 acres? I would like to get information from LandGate for my parcels of work. I do have 40 acres and an 80-acre parcel. Thanks, Roy. I really appreciate the comment. Yeah, so that's what LandGate does, and that's kind of the special thing that we offer for landowners. is you don't need a Rolodex of developers. They're already using LandGate. They use LandGate to source deals. Anytime you go to LandGate, you click on your parcel and you become, or you claim ownership of that property and you post your own listing. Again, it's free. There's no commission, no nothing, but you post your own listing. All of the developers who use LandGate will see your green dot show up on the map, and they are going to reach out to you directly. So if you have a couple of parcels there, feel free to go to LandGate. You can claim yourself as the owner, and we are going to, at no cost, we'll provide you a very large amount of information there. We do have a system and a subscription where if you want that data and information across every single parcel in the United States, who the landowners are, what their values are, how much acreage, every parcel in the United States, we have something called a Power Realty subscription. A lot of land professionals and a lot of large landowners use that tool to keep track of what's going on in and around their area and do due diligence that way. So appreciate that question. We'll move on to another one here. On average, what do solar leases pay? Are they paid monthly, quarterly, annually? Are there ever any royalty payments? Three really good questions and very common that we get. The amount that you're going to get paid, or at least offered for a solar lease on your property is heavily dependent on two main factors, really. Where your property is located in the United States, and there's a whole slew of variables and factors that drive that. As far as, what are the renewable energy incentives in the area? What is the price of power in the area? A whole bunch of other things. But then secondly, not only where the property is located in the United States, but what type of attributes your specific property actually has. And the biggest factor there is how many buildable acres your property has. So not every single acre of every property is logistically set up for solar panels. If it's in a floodplain, it's likely not going to work. If the hillside is too steep, you're at a 15% slope, it's too steep, right? If you have certain easements or right of way, so if there is a pipeline going underneath your property. Now you can find all of these things out for free at LandGate. You can find out all these attributes on your property. If you want to look in for anybody else's property or property you're buying, selling, you can get a subscription and you can do that very quickly. But all of those things factor into what you can what a developer can actually do on their property. The range, typically as of today, we're seeing anything, or our clients, excuse me, not our clients, our users of the platform, landowners, realtors, anybody who's dealing with land, they're seeing anywhere from $500 per acre per year up to $3,000 per acre per year. And that's for solar. It's for solar leasing. Battery storage, you're seeing different dollar per acre amounts. Wind energy, you're going to see different dollar per acre amounts. Oil and gas, you're going to see different dollar per acre amounts. Those payments are going to be paid on how many acres of your property is encumbered once it's gotten through that first option phase. The first option phase, they're going to take basically all your entire property under that option. Once they figure out how many acres of panels they can put on, that's what they're going to move into the development phase of the lease that you're going to be paid on for the 30 to 50 years. So once those payments start, it depends on, really what you negotiated with the developer and what you're looking at. We've seen some paid monthly, we've seen some paid quarterly, and we've seen some paid annually. So it's really dependent on the developer there. And then the next one, are there any royalty payments? And what a royalty payment is that you're being paid for the production. You're being paid for how much production is actually taking place on your property. So if we talk about oil and gas, there's a lease payment that you get on a per acre basis, and then you get paid a royalty of how much oil and gas is produced. You see something similar with that with wind energy. Depending on how much the wind turbines will produce, you'll see a royalty payment associated with it. Very few, if any, that I've ever seen royalty payments are included with solar. It's almost strictly a flat rent payment that you're negotiating up front. Most of those payments Very important to note, they have a built-in escalator, so they will increase year over year. But that's typically what you'll see. So very, very few. I have not personally seen any royalty payments built into any solar leases in the United States anyway. See, there's quite a few questions in the Q&A, and what if green down the parcel does not show up? The anonymous attendee, if you want to go ahead and send specific questions like that, as far as functionality, send those to Michaela Bishop, that's mb@landgate.com. We'll get right back to you on that. And then Mark's got a question. Can you please discuss adjustments for inflation each year once a 20 to 30-year lease begins? Mark, that's a good question. That's what I was just discussing there with what's called the escalator. So the typical escalator that we see across the United States and users see across the United States is anywhere from 1% to 2%. So that means if you're getting paid, let's say you sign a lease for $1,000 per acre per year. Year one, you're going to get paid $1,000 per acre per year. Year two, you're going to get 1% increase in that. So then whatever you're paid that year, the next year you're going to get another 1% increase and another 1% increase. So it does increase in value, but it's something for you all to consider. You know, a 1 or 2% increase. I have all the, you know, that's a flat increase that's laid out. What I've also seen some folks do is they're tying that back to inflation. So an inflation number. So they'll do, you know, 60, 70, 80% of what the CPI number is, and they'll work that into their lease, and that's their escalator. So there's a lot of things you can do. It brings up another really good question there where, or another topic where everything in your lease is negotiable. Right? It is all a contract negotiation. There's give and take to every negotiation. So if you maybe want a higher escalator, then you'll likely expect to have a lower lease amount because you're going to escalate likely higher through time. So everything is a negotiation. I suggest that you all clearly understand that. Don't be afraid to ask questions about your lease when you're talking with developers, things like that. The vast majority of these developers, they're very good folks. They want to work with you. They want to work with your, they want to help you make money on your property. And they're going to be as straightforward as possible. Like any other industry, there's bad actors in every single industry, right? So you trust, but you verify. The folks that utilize LandGate and will be reaching out to you, every one of those folks are verified. These are legitimate developers who develop properties across and projects across the United States. The next one's Eric. I have 30 acres of farmland. What if I have large lots on my residential properties? Can I include some panels on my rental residential properties I can use for roofs? Eric, yes, you can. Now that's different than the commercial scale type of solar installations, but we're starting to see a heck of a lot more folks use what I just called there. That would be behind the meter. So that would be, you don't really even need to have access to an enormous transmission line or a substation or something like that. You can directly start consuming that power on site. We call that behind the meter. So there's a lot of those folks doing that. Community solar, that would be an application there. If you have a subdivision or a development and you set aside 10, 15, 20 acres for a community solar farm where that power is going to be consumed on site, that's an option that you can have. And there's a lot, you're starting to see a lot of that there too. The next question here, we'll go ahead and answer that one. Are there any lease termination clauses? If so, typical amount of payment to terminate. So Jim, really good question. Very few, if ever, is there a termination payment from the developer. The landowner cannot terminate the lease because there's going to be a very large capital investment onto the property where that developer is going to need to recoup those capital costs through time. So there is no termination clause for the landowner. The termination clauses for the developer, they are industry standard. So that's not, if you get an offer, you get something in front of you and you see this clause that says the developer can terminate their lease at any time. Do not take that as this person's trying to pull one over on me. That is industry standard. Really across every resource. It doesn't matter if you're talking about solar, wind, battery storage, oil and gas, mining. These companies, if it's not financially viable, they have to they can't keep operating. It will like they can terminate the lease at any time, and typically you don't see a termination payment there. Again, everything is a negotiation. One thing I will add to that, and I've seen some really bad mistakes on this, is the way you make money is by getting solar panels on your property. The option payment, it's great. It's it's supplemental revenue for your property, but you really start making money once construction starts on your property and panels show up. That's when you really start making money. I've seen across the United States, folks negotiate themselves out of a deal where they are negotiating. They say they've got 800 acres and their neighbor has 800 acres. And they're going to let's say landowner A says that they signed a lease for $1,000 an acre. Well, landowner B is going to go there and say, well, I got a leg up on him. I know what he signed his lease for, or her. I'm gonna beat her. I'm gonna beat him. I'm gonna get $1,200 an acre. Well, the developer is going to look at that and say, okay, sure, I'll go ahead. That developers, they'll offer you a lease right now. It's the option period. You don't pay a heck of a lot of money in the option period. But when over the course of 3 to 5 years, they're going to analyze landowner A versus landowner B. Landowner A took $1,000 per acre per year. Landowner B took $1,200 per acre per year. It's essentially the exact same property. I can tell you who's going to get solar panels put on their property and get paid the $1,000 per acre per year. And I can tell you which landowner is going to get to the end of the 3 to 5 year period, and they're going to say, thank you. Logistically, your property didn't work. We went with a different property, and that's what we're going to move the development for to. So it's a very, very crucial thing to understand. You want to absolutely get the best deal for you and your family. 100% you do. We want you guys to get the absolute best thing for you and your family. We caution people to not negotiate yourself out of the deal. Don't be landowner B, who has to sit and look at those solar panels for 30 or 50 years and not get paid on them because you wanted to get another $100 or $200 per acre per year. So be very cautious of that. And then we'll go ahead and will tree removal be included? That's a question from Eric. When and if, most developers do not like having to cut trees down to put solar panels up. That's almost across the board in the industry. Most of them do not want to have to cut trees down. It's counterintuitive of what they're ultimately trying to do, right? They don't want to harvest and take down a native forest or whatever it is to put solar panels up. So what you'll typically see if a developer does harvest trees, it's back to a negotiation. Either you can sit back as a landowner and say, no, hold on, I'll go ahead and harvest the timber myself, and I'm going to pay a forester to do that, and you can make revenue off of your timber that way. Or you can say to the developer, I've seen this done before, where the landowner says, no, I don't want to deal with it at all. You go ahead and harvest the timber, you find a forester, you can sell it, just give me part of the revenue when you're done, right? So again, that's part of the negotiation. I'm seeing less and less developers wanting to take properties and parcels where it's heavily treed and things like that. So have another question here. I have 4,000 acres in the Utah desert. People are saying 21 miles away from power line. How can you utilize your lands through LandGate? Very good question. And we see a lot of very large landowners that have large tracts of land that within the resource itself would just be ideal for solar energy, for wind energy development. 4,000 acres is a lot of property. That is a lot of property. I mean, there's the amount of people in the world that own 4,000 acres is incredibly small. In most cases, the size of the property, if you have something 4,000 acres across the United States, people will pay to get to that opportunity. They'll put in a new transmission line, a new substation, and bring in infrastructure there because it's such a large opportunity. Now, there's clearly a threshold to that, saying that it's 20 miles away from power line substations. Well, you can verify that very quickly. You can go to the website, go ahead, find your property in Utah, you can go ahead and very quickly find out where the nearest substation are those really, my own personal opinion, these really ugly transformer looking things that are connected to transmission lines. But that's a substation. That is essentially an outlet, an enormous outlet where you can pull electrons off the grid and put electrons onto the grid, okay? That's really what people are looking for, trying to get access to those substations. That's a critical one, but if you have 4,000 acres and you have buildable property, you're near transmission lines, things like that, they'll build a new substation for you to have that access to the grid there. So I would say, go ahead and verify that. If people are saying it's 21 miles away from the power lines, go ahead and check it. We have our company, that is what we do. Again, we're not brokers, we're not a brokerage house, we're not buyers, we don't do any of that. We don't lease property. We do data and analytics, and we do it very, very well. Go ahead and check out your property and see what's there. The next one's a question from Brad here. How typical is getting an escalator to match inflation rate? Prior to about 12, 14 months ago, when inflation just shot through the roof, I won't say what my opinions are why that happened, but prior to that, most of the escalators were fixed at 1 or 2%. Now you're starting to see, it's fairly common that a lot of those escalators are fixed to an inflation number, at least a percentage of the inflation number. So it's definitely something that you should be asking about when you're talking with the developer that reaches out with you through LandGate. The next one, how could these solar leases impact the sale of the property in the future? That's a really good question. And the best way to understand the impact of a solar lease on a future sale of a property is that what is the likelihood that the lease is going to move forward? Without anything moving forward from the option period and then 30 years following that, most of these leases, almost everyone that I've seen, it does increase the cash flow and revenue on the property. Now, it may not be an enormous jump because it's the option period, but typically what we've seen through users on the platform is that even that option period, it pays for the property tax on the property for the most part. And some of them are significantly above that, just the option payment. I'll give you a really quick case study. A family in Southeast Wyoming, very, very large landowner, 6,000 plus acres. Just the option payments alone for the solar lease on their property is enough to, and I don't know if it's exactly the number, but it's getting them very close to paying off the entire ranch, just the option payments. So it does increase the value, right? It increases the value. If you can, the closer that property gets to a construction date, so year 1 goes by, year 2 goes by, year 3 goes by, correspondence starts happening between you and the developer, and they're scheduling out surveying of the property and soil tests of the property and platting of the property and laying out, this is where this thing's going to go and that. And the closer logistically you get to construction on your property, the value radically increases on the property. Most of these parcels that we're seeing solar, especially on the commercial side, larger scale commercial, these are vacant lots. So they're either being utilized for ranching, farming, they're recreational, or they're just flat out vacant lots, not really being utilized for much of anything at all. You've essentially taken a piece of property with very little to no cash flow, and you've increased that number. Once you get to the construction date, you've radically increased the value of that parcel, that real estate, but you've created another asset on that property, and that's the cash flow itself. This is not guaranteed cash flow, but there's people willing to buy that cash flow at a full-term discounted cash flow value at day 1, essentially. And that's something we'll talk about later on, of what you do once you get through that 3 to 5 year option, what you should be doing with those payments, or at least some options that other landowners are doing. That's really something to consider there. So there's a lot of real estate investors right now, a lot of land investors, a lot of energy companies are going out right now buying real estate simply to try to get that thing into a solar lease because it increases the value so much. So the next one's David. 500 to 3,000 is a huge range. What's major factors that dictate price per acre? David, it's a really good question. The biggest factor is where is your property located throughout the United States? Properties in California, landowners in California are going to get paid far higher than landowners in North Dakota. There's a lot of different variables and a lot of factors to that. I won't get into the full details of them here. I mean, we'll be here for 45 minutes trying to understand why stuff is super expensive in other areas and it's not in other areas. One of the big drivers, though, I will dig into this a little. One of the big drivers is what's called the renewable energy credit, and also combined with what is the cost of energy in that area. So if the cost of energy is very high, so if the developer can make a lot of money by selling this type of power, well, they can offer more to the landowner to lease the property to generate that power, to generate that product, whatever the product is. On the renewable energy credit side, if there's things set in place where the developer can now sell that product for a higher value, well, then they can offer the natural competition there is going to drive up the prices to lease that property. So we have a question further down in the presentation of, well, why are people in Minnesota, where the sun doesn't shine nearly as much as it does in Alabama or Arizona, why are landowners in Minnesota getting offers twice as high as people in Arizona or in Alabama or Mississippi? And the big reason for that is a renewable energy credit. You make a lot more money in Minnesota developing solar energy than you can in Arizona. Won't get into the driving factors of that or whether they make sense or not. But that's why, Dave, you see that big discrepancy. It really determines where you're at in the United States and the variables that are behind that. Next one is anonymous. How do you vet a solar developer? I have a lease offer from the solar company, but I may not be able to find much information on them by searching online. Number one, I want to commend you by at least doing your own research on whoever's reaching out to you. The folks on LandGate the energy companies on LandGate who use our platform to find landowners who want to work with them, these are folks that we vet. So we make sure these are credible companies, making sure they have actually developed projects before, they have healthy balance sheets, that these folks actually have money to develop projects. What you'll see is there's a lot of folks out there. Again, no industry, in my personal opinion, is a good industry or a bad industry. There's good actors in every industry and there's bad actors in every industry. Solar is absolutely no different. There's a lot of folks out there that will make random offers to anybody they can find, and they'll put them in an option period. When a lot of these companies don't have any money, and that's why they just put them in an option period. So that's a question, whether you're utilizing the LandGate platform and having folks that are on this platform reach out to you from your interest, or you're not, or you're just doing it yourself and you've received something in the mail and you're trying to do your own due diligence. Ask questions, ask as many questions as possible. And from what I've seen in my experience in almost every natural resource industry, I've worked in oil and gas significantly, I've worked in mining, I've worked in solar, wind, battery storage significantly. A reputable company is going to welcome questions. They might not return your phone call within 5 minutes, but when they're talking with you and you have questions, they'll happily answer your questions. So when you ask them, well, how many projects have you developed in the last 12 months in my state? Or how many projects are you currently looking at developing in my county? All of these questions that you should be asking, they're going to welcome those. And the more adversarial responses you get, that should raise some red flags with you of who you're actually dealing with. Again, could potentially be somebody who's on your property for 30 to 50 years. You really want to make sure that if again, all of the reputable developers I've seen, they want a really, really good relationship from the get-go with their landowners. you'll really be able to tell about the character of the company you're working with by the interactions you're having with them, their landmen, their land representatives, their land groups, things like that. So ask questions. I would say that to the anonymous question, ask as many questions as possible.
Craig, there is some related questions in the chat towards
Okay.
vetting solar developers, kind of in regards to like vetting the leases. A lot of questions about should I get an attorney to review the lease, and what kind of attorney would that be? Or is there a point in the process where an attorney is necessary to be involved, like during the option period or in general?
Yeah, so I would say yes. I think attorneys absolutely play an important role in this. I mean, it's your property. It's likely the most important asset that your family and yourselves actually own. Now, what I would be cautious of is that I've seen a lot of quote unquote energy attorneys with very, very little energy experience, and they will spend 2 days marking up a fairly boilerplate solar lease or wind lease or oil and gas lease because they really like to be paid on an hourly basis. That's not every attorney out there. But again, there's good actors and there's bad actors in every single industry. So vetting a development company, we do, and again, we do not provide legal advice. None of this is legal advice. We are not attorneys, but we do put some high-level pointers. We have resources on LandGate of, what does some of these things mean in oil and gas leases? I would suggest doing quite a bit yourselves and then getting an attorney involved. There's no reason to immediately pick up, in my opinion, there's no reason to immediately pick up the phone, call an attorney because you got a piece of mail or you got a letter in the mail. I don't think that's a smart thing to do. I think once you get to the point where you've gotten as much information and as many answers from the developer or developers, should be developers, right? You should be talking with more than one. Once you get as much information as you possibly can, and you've gotten to the point where you're comfortable with, okay, yeah, all right, maybe they initially offered you $800 per acre per year. And you've gotten to the point, it's like, okay, you go back and forth a little bit, you dance a little bit, and you go to maybe $900 per acre per year. And instead of a 1% escalator, you're going to tie it to an inflation number. Once you've gotten those things really kind of ironed out, I absolutely think it's a smart thing to do to hire an attorney who is experienced with these types of deals, and have them look over the lease so that you really understand there's no gotchas or catches in there. But I would recommend that you do that. As far as how you find these types of law professionals that deal with energy, we do not have any financial relationship with any of these attorneys, but there's thousands and thousands of folks just like you that use LandGate every day, and they have these types of questions. So depending on where you're at in the country, we can recommend an attorney to work with. And if they can't work with you, they can recommend an attorney to work with. So again, we're a very large resource for landowners, land professionals, realtors, all of those. We can help you out. So again, if you have questions and you need some of those resources, feel free to reach out to us. Email Michaela MB. That's mikeboy@landgate.com. Go ahead and email those in and we'll try to get those contacts to you.
I have read a little bit more questions in the chat and in the Q&A that kind of involve like in the leasing period. There's some questions about are you able to put in shrubbery to hide the solar panels a little bit, or while the solar panels are currently on the land, could you have like a beekeeping, like beehives? Can you still have farm animals? And then a little bit more of what if you decide to sell in the middle of this solar lease? So can you kind of talk about those things?
let's talk about, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jordan. Thanks for summarizing those. And absolutely, guys, I
Yeah.
really appreciate the questions. This is great. I don't know what your questions are until you tell me. So this is very good. We'll break that question into two sections there. And it goes back to everything is a negotiation. If you want your solar panel to be surrounded by ponderosa pines so that you don't have to look at them and no one else has to, and it doesn't look like 640 acres of glass every day, that's absolutely something you can negotiate for. And I think we're starting to see that more often, where some of these, again, reputable developers, they want to make you happy, because a happy landowner is a happy, productive facility, and you're going to be there for 30, 40 years and everybody's good. So they want to make you happy. Now, are they going to build a $5 million wall so you don't have to look at it? Probably not, right? Everything's a negotiation. And if you're going to ask for something that's atypical, then you might get a response back is like, okay, well, we can do that, but we're going to have to drop your lease payments from $850 an acre per year down to $800 per acre, whatever it is. But everything's a negotiation. I would make sure you bring that up. As far as operations and what you can do once the panels are there, that's really up to the developer. And when you're having those conversations, something that's really taking off lately, because there is foliage that's going to grow, depending on where you're at in the country, especially if you're in the Gulf Coast region, anywhere other than where I live. And we've had quite a bit of rain this spring, which has been wonderful. But desert areas, right, it doesn't rain much and you don't have much foliage. But other areas where you get a lot of rain, there's going to be grasses, there's going to be weeds, and they have to maintain that property. And it can be very expensive to go through and mow. Now, that's not on you, the landowner. Maintaining, mowing, keeping all of that together, that's not on you. Those maintenance costs are on the developer. But the developer is always looking at trying to cut and minimize as much cost as possible. So rather than having to spend, let's say, $100 per acre per year to mow this thing, what we've started to see is goats and sheep being utilized to actually forage and range underneath the solar panels, keeps the foliage down, and then actually the landowner can lease out that ground if you've brought that up and negotiated that with the developer that, hey, can we do this? As long as it doesn't damage the solar panels and it's saving them some money, they're going to be all for it. So in a lot of those cases, I've seen a win-win-win where a farmer or, a rancher can come in and go ahead and put some sheep or some goats on the property. You as the landowner can essentially lease that property out, get some sheep or some goats on there. And the developer looks at it and says, great, they're keeping the weeds down, they're keeping the grass down, and I don't have to mow. So that is an opportunity there. And then Jordan, the last part of that question is, help me understand.
Yeah, if they decide that they want to sell the land during the solar lease, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah. So let me touch on this. It's a really important point, is that you need to understand once you get to the point that you are 12 to 6 months away from construction starting on that property, you fundamentally have a different property because you've generated a new asset on the property. You have your land, there's land appreciation that's going to keep increasing through time. They're not building any new land, right? So a lot of landowners don't want to sell their land, even if it's covered in glass, they don't want to sell it. But they're looking at this cash flow and they're saying, okay, I'm getting paid $1,000 per acre per year. It's going to escalate, let's say 2% over the next 30 years. I don't want to wait 30 years to receive all of this money. Can I sell the cash flow and not have to sell my land? And the answer is yes. And I'll tell you my personal opinion that the moment you are able to do that, the moment you get to the point where construction begins on that property, it's really something that every landowner, whether they have wind turbines or solar panels on their property, you really need to look at that option. Because you essentially, again, you have two assets. You have your land, you have the cash flow. That land is going to keep appreciating through time. It's a great asset to have. It's a great asset to hold on to. The cash flow, especially for solar, works a little bit different, right? We talked about it is a flat payment of rent. And if you get solar panels on you, you have won the lottery. You've done a great job. You've done your research. You have received as many offers as you can. You've negotiated the best deal you can. And if you get solar panels on your property, you have won the lottery. It's an amazing thing. And it's a huge annuity, and it's a huge cash flow influx to the American landowner, most of them farmers and ranchers. And I love seeing it. I love seeing money going to these folks and their families. But they're not done making good decisions yet. They really, really need to understand this flat rent payment. If there's someone out there, and there's a lot of folks out there right now that just simply want to buy the cash flow from operating solar facilities and operating wind turbine facilities. If you remember what I said a little earlier, these are not guaranteed cash flows. So if your lease, primary term 20 years and 2 10-year options, so a 30-year lease, there is no guarantee that your lease is going to go for 30 years, and there is no termination payment. There is no penalty. They can be there one day and they can be gone the next. Now they have to reclaim everything, but your cash flow, again, your land asset's always going to be there. Your cash flow asset is not a guaranteed asset. It's going to slowly increase through time as far as the value because of the escalator. But inflation is going up far quicker than 1 or 2% per year. Keep that in mind of what that's doing to your payments. Also keep in mind, this is ordinary income. And a lot of landowners who win that lottery, it bumps them up into a much higher tax bracket. So they're paying much higher taxes. That cash flow is not competing very well with inflation. And what most landowners are not aware of, and this is something that you absolutely need to put into your contract, that you have the ability to assign the cash flow to a different party. You have the ability to sell your lease. Now, I've seen a lot of developers say, no, you can't do that. And that is absolutely not true. We see it happen day in and day out across the United States. And landowners absolutely can do that. So be aware that is something you can do. It's something you should consider. Not always. It's not always something you should do. But for a lot of families, they've won the lottery. They're going to take this cash flow. They're going to diversify it. They're going to de-risk it. They're going to sell this cash flow, keep their land, and they're going to reinvest that cash flow into more farmland or more ranch land, or they're going to invest in what's called a Delaware statutory trust, and they're going to invest this one stream of cash flow into a 50% to a medical building and 20% into a strip mall and 15% somewhere else. And they're going to diversify this cash flow. And a lot of these other investments are performing far greater than a 1 or 2% escalator. So that's really something to consider. And we have another webinar where we talk solely about that. We just had that webinar with Pete Mazine 2 weeks ago, who's a land professional who helps landowners in that situation who have gotten through and gotten lease and gotten solar panels and have won the lottery. And there's some very, very good resources for folks who are in that boat. LandGate's one of those resources. There's land professionals who use LandGate who utilize those resources. So I would recommend anybody out there who may be in that situation, know people in that situation, they really do need to understand their options. It's a phenomenal win for them getting construction and solar on their property, but there's additional things that they do need to consider. So I did just want to make that point. We've got about 5 minutes here left. Jordan, reading through the questions, is there any kind of more, is there a theme sticking out that we need to address that a lot of people are asking about?
Yes. So I'm seeing a lot of questions about how can these landowners utilize LandGate. LandGate is a tool that is free for landowners that can be used across the continental US. I saw a lot of questions about what states that we can assist with. Throughout the US, we can assist. We have data for those landowners. If you're looking to claim ownership, that's the easiest way that you can generate a property report to vet your land to see if it has potential for solar or wind. And that is all free to you guys to utilize. So someone did ask that they're interested in buying land and that has potential for solar and wind leasing. So their question was, how can LandGate help me to buy good pieces of land?
Perfect. Great question. Thank you, Jordan, for that. And again, I hope you guys feel that this is not a salesy plug type thing. We're not trying to convince you of anything. This is really to try to get as much information you guys as possible. But since there's been some questions here, what LandGate does on the analytics side that's very, very unique, and that a lot of land professionals, both investors, brokers, agents, landowners themselves that are looking to buy additional property want to do just like the individual who asked that question. They want to buy property. They want to understand the property that they're buying is a fair market value just from a dirt perspective. They're buying farmland. Are they getting a fair deal on the farmland? But if I'm getting ready to buy something, I want to maybe buy something that has a hidden annuity that nobody else knows about, that if I can buy this piece of property and in 4 or 5 years get it into a solar lease, and now 5 or 6 times, put a multiple of 5 or 6 times on that asset, it makes a good investment into an absolutely phenomenal investment. People do that with LandGate. So we have a subscription, we call it Power Realty. It's $25 a month, and that's the only reason I'm putting a sales hat on here is because someone asked. It's a monthly subscription. It's $25 a month. It provides analytics on every single parcel across the United States. So every single parcel, you guys have probably gone to the website, claimed ownership, and you got all of that information for free on your parcel. Power Realty for $25 a month gives you access to that for 174 million parcels. So what it does, it gives you access, what deals are for sale for land, where's land for sale out there? But then you can fold on all of these analytics and see, okay, well, there's 250 acres of farmland for sale in northern Arkansas. Great. I want to know if I'm getting ready to buy this, how much different types of land am I getting and how much am I paying for that? But not only that, what's the carbon credit potential on that piece of property? Is this a good potential solar site? All of those analytics are laid out and they're already calculated and they're at your disposal. You can do that across the country. So me personally, obviously I'm biased. I'm the president and co-founder of this company, but I have my own personal subscription to my own product. And I use it when I buy property. Every single property that I buy, every single property that I sell, I know far more about that property than anybody that I'm dealing with, because I've shown all of the analytics. I know exactly if I'm buying this piece of property and there's no possibility for solar or wind or oil and gas or mining or anything on this property, I know it. And I know all I'm really buying is just this land. So I better make sure that this land that I'm buying, I'm getting a good, fair price. Now, if I know that this land I'm buying is in a really, really good spot for solar energy or battery storage or electrical vehicle charging or oil and gas minerals, if I know that, well, I have an enormous leg up in my negotiations because I'm negotiating what everybody else knows about the property. I'm buying this piece of property knowing what everybody else knows, but I know all of these other things as well. So long-winded response to your question. If that's the situation you're in, if you want to do research on that, there's a lot of landowners who have this subscription just to find out who owns what in their area. All of the landowner information across the United States on every single parcel, $25 a month, along with all of the analytics. That's our subscription. So that's the last plug I'll do for that. And we are at the top of the hour. I see there's quite a few questions here that I haven't got to. I really appreciate all the questions here. I'll go ahead and stay on for 10, 15 more minutes. I love the engagement. We're going to keep recording this, so you guys can always come back to it. But if you have to jump, I appreciate your time. I just want to get this done because I know some people have some stuff at the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for coming. Like I said, I'm going to keep going through some of these questions, get through as many as I can. If you don't have time, if you have to jump now, we'll be sending you a link and you can come back and watch the rest of the questions later. So if you got to jump, thank you for attending. We'll go ahead and I like this one. This question here by Joshua Phillips. My family owns 200 acres in Ohio. However, we are only the surface owner and a coal company owns the mineral rights. Would solar still be an option? What if the mineral rights owner is not willing to cooperate with the process? Joshua, really good question. And we do see this across the US where solar developers, for the most part, want to develop want to invest capital in solar projects on parcels where the surface owner and the mineral owner are the same. And the reason why is because in the United States, the dominant estate is the actual mineral estate. Say that again. The dominant estate in the United States is the mineral estate, not the surface estate. So the mineral owner has the right to access their minerals and develop their minerals within reason. So can a mineral owner come in and just scrape your surface and you have nothing to say about it? No, they cannot do that. But they do have a right to access their minerals. So that is a reason why a lot of solar developers will shy away, because there's a risk. Everything they do is tied to the surface. So if somebody comes in and says, okay, well, I need to access this property. And let's say for coal here, Joshua, they want to mine this coal, but they're not even mining it for coal. They're mining it to extract the rare earth elements out of it to make the solar panels, right? So they come in and say, you put solar panels on the property, and they say, no, we're going to go ahead and make this a rare earth element mine now. Panels got to come down because we have the right. They try to stay away from that. Now that just because you do not own 100% of the mineral rights doesn't mean you won't get solar. We see a lot of landowners who do get solar projects, battery storage projects, and things like that on their property without being the sole mineral owner. But it definitely helps. It gives the leg up on the property if you do own the mineral rights. Mark's got a good question here. What pays more in a lease, solar, wind, or battery storage? When you look at this, to answer accurately, you have to look at the footprint and the impact that each type of resource has. Battery on a per acre basis is by far the highest. Nothing comes close to battery storage as far as a lease potential. And most of those developers want to buy the property. Those are very, very large values that we've seen. But when you look at what battery storage impact is, those are very impactful. I mean, it's essentially you're building a facility with a concrete foundation. There's a very heavy facilities. It's quite an encumbrance on the property. So obviously the compensation is going to be much higher. Solar is going to be behind that. So solar, still very intense encumbrance on the property. Can't really do much with it. We talked about running sheep and goats underneath the property. Other than that, that's about all you can do. And then there's going to be a buffer outside of that. So if you've been hunting a piece of property, obviously, if you're, a bunch of quail fly over solar panels and you got a splattering of shot coming over, that's not really good for solar panels either. So they'll usually put like a buffer around that of what you can and cannot do, just so it doesn't damage the panels. But still fairly intensive. The last is going to be wind on a dollar per acre basis. Most of the wind leases are going to be paid on the turbine. Again, wind leases, they have an option period and then the production period. Option period is paid on a per acre basis. The payment period is paid on a per turbine basis for the most part. There are some people that get paid on a per acre basis, but most of them are paid on a per turbine basis. Again, you can do a heck of a lot still with your property with wind towers on them. I'm not going to comment on how they look or whether people like them or hate them or whatever that is, but you can still do a lot with the property. You can still farm it, you can still ranch it, you can still hunt it, do all of those things. So that's why the dollar per acre is a little bit lower there. The next question, can you provide a list of reputable developers? So the same way we do not sell your information, we don't do the same thing on the other side. So no, we don't provide lists of people who are using the platform, things like that. But Another reason why we don't give that out is because a lot of people who are trying to replicate what we're doing, a lot of people who don't have original ideas for themselves and can't come up with those original ideas, just want to go ahead and kind of piggyback off of the work we've done. So we don't allow that. But I can promise you that you put your listing out there, there's going to be some of the world's largest energy companies are going to see that listing.
Craig, there are a couple questions about like the types of properties that energy developers are seeking out. So maybe properties that are, close range to transmission lines, properties that are close to substations. If you want to talk about those types of properties, or, state specific properties as well with incentives and things like that. If you want to touch on that again.
Okay. Yeah, I'll touch on that again. And all the things I'm going to say, we're going to provide for you for free at LandGate on your specific parcel. So when I say developers are looking for properties that are flat, that have a lot of buildable acres, and you're going to say, well, how flat is my property? How many buildable acres is my property? We'll tell you exactly how many buildable acres you have on your parcel or your parcels. We'll tell you exactly what it is. Okay, we'll tell you how many acres you have in flood zone, how many you have in tree cover. We'll tell you all of those things, and we'll tell you how many buildable acres you have. So that helps you understand what you have from that perspective. So they're looking for something flat, and they're looking for something they can put as many panels on as they possibly can. Another thing, they're looking for proximity to infrastructure. How close are they to substations? How close are they to transmission lines? How close are they to distribution lines? What is the, and again, you can find all of that out very easily on LandGate. Another thing, and this is more of an engineering metric, where there's a lot of folks out there who will just simply use a GIS layer and say, okay, well, I have the same data because there's a substation there. Sometimes that doesn't even matter if you're close to a substation. You have to be able to put electrons into that substation, and it has to be at the correct price for an energy developer to be interested. So there's a ton of engineering metrics that go into the calculation number for your specific parcel that we calculate in LandGate. At the end of the day, you're going to find out by looking at your parcel and claiming ownership, or even having a subscription and clicking around the United States, whether it's a good or bad parcel. We have a heat map where literally you just click a button and it's going to show you where high value areas are, where low value areas are. All of those things are taken into account, but you find that out on LandGate. So many different factors as far as geographically in the United States where people want to be. I'd say if you asked me that question 2 or 3 years ago, the state of Massachusetts, everybody and their dog wanted to be in the state of Massachusetts. There's an enormous renewable energy incentive in the state of Massachusetts. Now nobody wants to be in the state of Massachusetts because everything's full. Everything, there's solar farms everywhere. Every interconnection queue is full. You can't get any more electrons on the grid there until they do some upgrades and things like that. Now there's other places in the United States. All of that is factored into LandGate's analytics of where is there available capacity, what is the cost of the power, and where do developers need to go for their projects to move forward. So the Gulf Coast region is obviously very large now. Really every state outside of, for commercial type developments, everything outside of the New England states are full throttle moving forward. Doesn't matter if you're talking about Wyoming or California, every state's moving full throttle with it. Now, the New England states, they're still moving forward full throttle, but they're doing smaller community sized behind the meter type of developments. So they're not looking for a 2,000 acre solar farm in Vermont. They're looking for behind the meter 5 to 20, 30 acre parcels in the area where all of those other variables kind of line up. So hopefully that's helpful there. David's got a question here. Every industry has knowledgeable sales reps to facilitate the sale between seller and buyer for fee, cattle, minerals, real estate. Does solar have knowledgeable sales reps like other industry? David, that's a really good question. And the answer is yes. So that Power Realty tool that I mentioned to you, there's thousands of realtors across the United States who have been using that tool for several years at this point. So if you are a realtor, you are an agent, broker, land professional, a landman, and you want to get into this and make this part of your business, Power Realty is a phenomenal resource and tool for you. If you're a landowner listening right now, and you're saying, okay, I'm interested in doing this, but I don't have the confidence to create my own listing and start negotiating and talking with developers and buyers right away. There's, again, thousands of real estate and land professionals that use Power Realty across the United States. If you would like to work with one of those individuals and be connected with them, LandGate will do that for you. So just let us know where you're at, what you're interested in, and we will send you to one of the users for Power Realty in your area. So essentially, we'll send those folks to that user and that land professional.
There are some questions about why don't like energy developers just purchase the land? Why do they insist on leasing it from landowners instead of just outright buying it?
So really, maybe the best question of the entire webinar. Like, why would you just not buy it? Historically, energy and natural resource developers leased property because it was less risky. It was less of a capital commitment to lease something than just go out straight away and buy it, and the exploration concept didn't work. Now that's traditional energy. That's oil and gas, minerals, mining, all of those things. What we've seen over the last probably 4 or 5 years is there is starting to be an increased push of developers buying property rather than leasing it. Now, I'll tell you, if you're a landowner and you're hearing that, I'll tell you the really bad part about that is most landowners do not understand what they own. And I don't mean any offense by that, but most of the landowners that we talk with, and we talk with very, very, very large landowners and very small landowners across the United States, they understand in depth exactly what they're utilizing that piece of property for. If they're a farmer, there's nothing that you can say to that farmer about monetizing that land and maintaining that land and conserving that land. Then you can't, then you never say anything to that farmer that they don't know. Now, if they're a rancher, same thing. You're not going to tell them anything about ranching on that property that they don't know. But that is their profession, is farming, ranching. If they're a timber individual, that is their profession. And the bad thing about people, not just developers going out and buying it, but opportunistic, smart land investors going out and buying land where everybody knows what the land is, been farming it for 110 years. Everybody knows you've been farming it for 110 years. They know primarily what crops you rotate in and how often you drill it and how often you plow it, all of these things. Everybody knows that. But if you as the landowner, and I come from a very rural part of the country, my family, they're all, if they didn't work in oil and gas, they were all farmers and ranchers. That's the community that I come from. So I passionately care about American landowners. I really do. But if you do not know anything more than what you've been doing on the property for 100, 150 years, and somebody else does, and they come and they buy your property, you're selling what you know about that property. I tell this to my own family members. So if you're thinking about selling or buying anything and you don't know what is actually on that property, you're guessing. Yeah, I can't tell you anything more about what the farm value is there. You already know that. That's your profession. I can't tell you anything more about ranching. That's your profession. That's what you do. But to the question, why wouldn't someone just come and buy this ranch ground, this farm ground, this desert ground, this vacant lot in Commerce City, Colorado? Why wouldn't someone just come and buy it if it's got that how much high value to it? Why wouldn't someone just come and buy it and then lease it out themselves? Or wouldn't the developer just do that? And they are doing that. That's why we host these types of webinars, is to educate folks who own this land. It's your land and you need to know as much about it as possible. I don't want to see that. I hate seeing that. I hate seeing people sell their property, not knowing anything about it. And 2 months later, it's listed on a marketplace That investor just put it into a lease and tripled the value of the property. That is why we built this platform. It's an enormous idea. And there's some enormous gorillas in the room that do not like what we do because it fundamentally disrupts their business. Knowing about what you have and what your property is worth is your responsibility as a landowner. So when you're going through and you're researching and ideally, if you're a savvy investor, you want to be the person that knows more about that piece of property. And you want to buy that piece of property knowing that it has very high whatever the natural resource is, it has very high potential annuities on it. It's not guaranteed, but you have an opportunity to maybe monetize that and increase the value of the property. So that is happening. It's happening right now. People are selling their property to folks, and they're never, if you put yourselves in a savvy buyer's shoes, if you have a property and you don't know anything about it, you've never heard of LandGate, you've never heard this webinar, and you don't know anything about solar energy, and somebody's wanting to buy that piece of property from you, and they do know all of this, the last thing they're going to tell you is like, well, okay, well, it's really good for solar too. Do you want me to pay you more money for it? No one's going to give you more money if you're getting ready to sell a piece of property and you don't know about hidden potential value. You could be losing out significantly. Now, we're not going to say that every single parcel in the United States is a potential $1 million property for solar battery storage EV charging. But as the trend continues of capital flowing into these types of resources, increasingly, those potential annuities are radically increasing the value of parcels and the value of the landowners on those parcels. But if they do not know, they don't know. And other people do know. Land investors use Power Realty. There's a lot of land buyers that use Power Realty, and they use that to find properties that have high value, and they go out and buy those pieces of property. Sometimes it's a developer. They'll just go straight away. They'll buy the property. It's going to save them money. They own a hard asset. It's going to appreciate, and they don't have to pay rent. And I've seen that happen. I've seen farms get sold, and 5 years later, they're covered in solar panels. And those landowners, this actually happened. Landowners called LandGate and they said, well, we sold this farm 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's covered in panels. We did really good on the sale. We sold it for 5% above what the market was. And they say, well, how much do you think it would be worth with all those solar panels on it? And I wouldn't even answer their question because it's heartbreaking for them to know that you sold the farm. You sold the farm. Now, again, there's bad actors in every single industry, but the reason why LandGate exists is so that it gives a little bit of firepower to the landowners who typically never had access to this type of data. These are incredibly expensive data sets. The millions and millions of dollars we've spent building this platform, and to offer it for $25 a month. I host classes, I teach classes for real estate agents, things like that. And the first time when we told them that it was $25 a month, a bunch of people laughed. Like, you got to be kidding me. You're giving it away. So, well, I'm glad you feel that way, that the product is that valuable, but you still have to use the product. You still have to go to the LandGate. You have to click on your parcel, and this is free. Click on the parcel, claim ownership. That's completely free. Put a little, if you put some effort into it, you're going to learn something. You may learn that there's no opportunity there. You may learn that there is some opportunity there. And then you can go ahead and leverage the marketplace. So I hope that covers, at least on a high level. We didn't get through all of these, but I really like this. This actually works really well, Jordan. I wasn't planning on having this much engagement. We're not even through it all. But yeah. I only had like 8 typical questions. I hope this was useful. Jordan, I think this might be something that maybe we do this again. I think we just kind of, let's go ahead and do another one where we schedule, we'll talk maybe about battery storage next time and EV charging, because a lot of these resources, the questions all do kind of tie together. And at the end of the day, for the landowners on the call, how do you make more revenue on your property? At the end of the day, how can you generate more income on that property? It's more important than ever right now, with the way the economy is, the way inflation is, to generate income as best you can. So
Mhm.
That's why we've generated LandGate, and I think we can have some more of these Q&As. But I think we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, I
We're
just wanted
about
to say
yeah.
really quick, Craig, that we
Go
do
ahead.
have another landowner webinar coming up in August, August 16th, and that's going to encompass leasing land for every resource. We're going to discuss, solar, wind, carbon, oil and gas. So feel free to register for that webinar coming up in mid-August. We can hit all of these questions that kind of pertain to, many different resources. So feel free to register for that. We'll be sending out this recording on Friday. It'll be viewable on YouTube, so you can see the video questions that were shared during this webinar. So yeah, feel free to register for that, bring all these questions back over, and we'll have another hour to discuss.
I'm gonna try to knock out just real quick. I'll take my Craig hat off, and in the next 10 minutes, I'm gonna get through all these questions and just give a quick response, Jordan. So let's just
Perfect.
get through this real quick. Can a developer help me develop a microgrid for my land? 3 adjacent neighbors. Yes. So Jen, yes, they can. That would be a behind the meter type scenario. Get your property out there. Let us know that you post it, and we'll get that out to the folks that are doing more behind the meter type developments there. Dawn, we've got, how long does it take for an interconnection application to a substation to be approved, and how can this be tracked online? Dawn, it's a really good question. Some of these utilities are very difficult to get the data out of them. We scrape that data. We try to put as much on the website as possible. Interconnection queue for a substation can take years. It's a very lengthy process. There's a larger regulation involved with it. So it's not a short process. I'd say at a minimum 2 to 3 years for the most part is what you would be looking at there. So now we've got Brad. How typical are milestone development payments? Our property has a substation transmission line located within it, and I was told that since substation exists with capacity to add megawatts, we can share. We can potentially share in a reduced development cost from the developer pocket. Brad, good point. Yes, if there's already infrastructure there, that adds value. As far as deferring cost to the developer, that just means your payments, your lease, your land is worth more money. So your lease should be worth more money because they don't have to spend as much money there. So, and you can see milestone payments, right? You'll start with your option payment, construction payments, COD, commercial operation date payments. So you can, and again, everything's a negotiation. You can negotiate interconnection queue payments. You can negotiate those into your contract. We'll go to Andrew. Hi, Craig. Is there any landlord responsibilities over the course of the lease entitlement period? Strictly tenant responsibilities. There's very, very few landlord responsibilities other than you're going to have some things in your contract saying, yeah, you're not going to allow, like if you're a cattle rancher, you're not going to open the gate and let your cattle run through there, rub on the panels and destroy them or anything like that. So it's basically your responsibilities. Don't break the solar panels in a nutshell, right? But that's about it. Other than that, it's the tenant, it's their responsibility, maintenance, operation expenses, all of those things. Next one, if you ever have a solar lease offer from one developer, would you recommend shopping around for a period prior to agreeing to a lease? You don't necessarily need to shop around, but you absolutely need to be comfortable knowing that that's a reputable developer. Me personally, everything that I own is out into a public marketplace. I don't care what I'm selling. It could be a motorcycle. I'm not just going to call one person who I know wants to buy a motorcycle. I'm going to say, hey, who wants to buy this motorcycle? Who wants to take this solar lease? And I'm going to try to get as many options as I can there. So also be careful, you don't want to negotiate yourself out of a deal, and you don't want to come off as someone who is going to be blowing off someone who's a reputable buyer who's going to step right into right out of the chutes and say, hey, we're going to give you our very top offer right now. This is as high as we can go. Like, we don't want to do this for 3 or 4 months. Like, kind of, do you want to move forward? You kind of got to play that yourself and see how you feel with that. But there are very reputable developers that do just that. They're going to say, this is the top we can do, and it is, and that's probably the top they can possibly do, and they want to move forward quickly. So Keep that in mind when you're doing these negotiations. With solar panels on the land, does that increase the tax? So yes, it will increase your taxes. Most of these leases, the developer will cover the increase in tax. So if your taxes increase because of the operations on the property, that will be covered by the developer. Any increase in tax will be covered by the developer. Let's see, any studies on solar farms having negative effect on neighborhood property value? Jim, really good question. Obviously, for the property that the solar panels are on, radically increases the value. From what we've seen, immediately surrounding the solar farm, and if the parcel has buildable acres, it actually increases the value because there's potential that you could do the same thing there. Now, if it is, you got 40 acres and only those 40 acres are the only flat 40 acres and the surrounding 5,000 acres is beautiful, wooded, forested areas, and the plan is to put 5-acre lots on it, it could have a negative effect. I don't know if there's studies out there. I'm sure there are, and I'm not saying it does or it does not, but that's just kind of what I've seen across the United States there. What additional considerations should be taken into account if you also live on the property and the panels could be within 2,000 feet of your house? Talking setbacks and things like that there, again, I don't know if we're talking if it is somebody on your, if the panels are on your property and you're 2,000 feet away from your own panels, or if you want to be 2,000 feet away from somebody else's panels. Typically what you'll see is people whose property, and this is every natural resource, not just solar, wind, battery storage, and oil and gas mining. For the persons whose property the project is going to be on, they'll have that project going right up to their house because they're being paid for it. Now, the neighbors, they're going to want obviously setbacks off of that. So it really depends when you're talking how close do you want to be or how far away you want to be from the resource or the project, whichever one it is, whether you own the property or not. So that's something to keep in mind if you're a developer, is that if you are doing a housing development and you're planning on doing your own solar facility and generating revenue for you and your LLC for it versus doing behind the meter and selling the power to the community, there may be different types of setbacks and there may be different implications with the property value on that, depending on what you're going to do with that solar project. In your opinion, is it smarter to keep parcels landowner oriented or to have exit strategies in place prior to leasing? I would say you take it a step at a time. First of all, understand what kind of property you have, get information on it. If it's a decent spot, even relatively decent spot, put it out there in the market. It doesn't cost you anything, and see what kind of interest it can generate. That's number one. As you start moving through the process, then you start having to take into account what are you going to do, because the goal is potentially to have a 30 or 50 year annuity. You always need to have ideas in mind of what you can do with those, but keep things one step at a time. We try to do a really good job of that, of trying to, where are we at? Most of these folks here, I'm guessing, probably don't have cash flows in place. So it's really asking questions and answering questions about what to do from the very start. But also know what you can possibly do in the future there. So, take one step at a time. Do you recommend splitting your property so the solar lease portion is on its own parcel? I don't like the idea of having easements on the portion of property I live in. Absolutely, that's something you can do. I've seen some folks do that. So yeah, you can go ahead and carve out, create a different parcel, and do it that way. So yeah, that's absolutely an option that you can do. So minimum cash flow is a minimum 20 years or as negotiated. It's a good question because they're not guaranteed cash flows. So the lease, the only thing that's guaranteed is that developer can encumber the property for the amount of time that you've agreed to, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. The cash flow is not guaranteed. If something happens, the cash flow is not guaranteed. They can terminate the contract. The only thing that's guaranteed in the contract is that they have the ability to be there. The primary term is roughly anywhere from 20 to 30 years, but there's usually options associated with that. Again, everything is negotiable. Next one is from Sandra. In the context of winning the lottery, what is the conversion rate between securing an option and getting solar panels on the property? Really good question. What we've seen, probably 20 to 30% of the folks that get into an option lease actually end up getting panels on them. Now, I think that ratio is going to increase because there's been a massive increase of investments into actually getting the panels. That seems to be some of the biggest setbacks right now, is actually getting the panels themselves and getting the supply chain of getting the projects up and running. So we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, we have other webinars talking about rare earth elements and our reliance on one particular country of those rare earth elements, which is not a good thing, but how LandGate's playing a role in that and how American landowners can play a role in improving that. But it is about 20, 30%. Again, it goes back to what I said earlier, do not negotiate yourself out of the deal. If everyone around you has negotiated a $750 per acre per year lease, and you're going to get $850 an acre per year, well, I can almost guarantee your property is not going to be one of the 20 or 30% that actually get the panels. Any tax write-offs? I'm not aware from the landowner perspective. From the developer's perspective, yes, there's a lot, but it's a lot of those are also associated with many other industries. But tax write-offs for the landowner, none that I'm aware of. Again, none of this that's been conveyed in this is tax advice. I'm not a tax accountant, so I'm not aware. That's something you would probably want to have conversations with your own personal tax accountant as you're going through the lease negotiating process. Does selling the cash flow work for rental properties? So help me, two scenarios. Eric, if you're renting a piece of property and you are, maybe, I don't know, if you're renting a piece of property and they put solar panels on it, you're likely not going to be renting the property anymore, because now that landowner's renting it to somebody else who's going to pay them to encumber the property. If you're talking about renting or selling cash flows for rental properties as far as commercial real estate and residential real estate, I don't know. I don't know if people do that or not. We're not experienced in that at all. So I don't know. That's a good question. I'm going to write that. I'm going to take note of that one. I'd like to actually know that personally for myself, if there's anything set up out there for basically landowners to monetize that cash flow. I don't know. I think it'd be difficult just because most real estate leases are not 30 to 50 years. They're sometimes on a month by month basis. So it might be a little tough, but I don't know. Is it common or possible for a solar developer to lease build on BLM land? Yes, and they do. Developers do build on government land. Now, can you as a tenant on BLM land take a lease to encumber BLM land? Not that I've seen. So if you own 5,000 acres of fee property, ranch land property, and another 3,000 acres of BLM that you've been leasing, I do not think that you can lease the BLM parcels and make revenue off of those, from what I've seen. Are lease rates based on buildable acres or total acres? Concerned that unused acres would be functionally unusable. Okay, the first part of the lease, the option period, where they're going to be paying you rough estimate anywhere from probably $15 to $50 per acre per year. They're going to take your entire property. So they're going to do the total. Now, once it moves through construction and they actually put the panels on your property, that's going to be where it just goes to buildable acres, or even acres that they are encumbering. So that number could come down significantly. What a lot of landowners like to do is they'll put a minimum of what acres they'll actually get paid for. So if they have 200 acres of property, they'll say, yep, we'll go ahead and sign the lease, but at a minimum, when you get to the construction phase and I start getting paid my lease money, At a minimum, I'm going to get paid 100 acres. And I see that quite regularly. That's something that you should consider. Do you have a recommended process for an owner of 40 acres interested in leasing to a solar company? Yes, absolutely. You have 40 acres and you're interested in this topic we've been discussing. Go to LandGate, claim ownership of your parcel, and create a listing. It's your own listing. It's free. Doesn't cost you anything. You have zero obligations. I probably should have said this earlier. You have zero obligations to accept any offers from people who reach out to you. You have zero obligations to accept anything. But raise your hand, put yourself out into the market, see if there's people out there who have the capital to develop solar energy. Let them see that you're interested. Let them see that, hey, I want a phone call. I want someone to make me an offer. Let them look at your opportunity. If they like it, then they'll go ahead and move forward and they'll give you a call. So that was my best recommendation that you could do. Leverage the system that we built, the marketplace we built, and go ahead and get your listing up.
And be educated on,
correct.
The value of your land through the data that, LandGate provides to you. That's what it's there for. So you're not going in, not knowing anything, go in knowing something.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jordan. Jim, next, can you determine if an offer is comparable to others in your area? That's determining value, right? Determining whether your offers are matching what the value is there. Jim, from what I've seen, the very best way to do that is, get as many eyeballs on it as possible. And from what Jordan just said, be as knowledgeable about your property as possible. Comps are very, very difficult for people to understand in energy because they don't really work. Just because a landowner in even a certain county, let's say a landowner on the north side of the county got $900 per acre. And you heard about that landowner got paid $900 per acre, and they're being paid that. This project started, they started their negotiations 6 years ago. And they're getting paid $900 an acre now. Doesn't necessarily mean that you should be getting $900 an acre or vice versa, right? So really be knowledgeable about what your specific property can do. And that's what the point Jordan just made there. Question from Mark. Craig, you discussed potential sell cash flows from solar leases. What discount rate should be used for the present value of the cash flows? And is there any industry standard? There is no industry standard, Mark. And it changes pretty radically. Over the last 2 years, the discount rates have changed pretty radically because interest rates have changed, right? They're directly linked to interest rates, what the discount rates are and how competitive and expensive the capital is to buy this money. I won't give you any specific, what the discount rate is. It is what I can say is it's incredibly competitive. The groups that are out there buying this cash flow, extraordinarily well funded, and it is very, very competitive. So I can tell you from an oil and gas perspective, a producing asset, meaning that a producing oil and gas well or producing mine or traditional energy source, they'll usually trade anywhere from a discount rate of 10 to 12% for something that's producing. Solar wind, I can tell you right now that it's lower than that, quite a bit lower than that. So incredibly competitive capital. Again, really the amazing thing LandGate does is connect the folks that have that asset. No cost to them, no cost to these folks. Connect those folks and let the transaction take place. The last one, yep, looks like we're at the end here. As a follow-up, can you find out what others, neighbors, county, etc., have either negotiated or closed for their lease rate? Now, we do have an upgraded subscription that does have a lot of comp data and comp information. That's used for a lot of those folks using that are energy developers, things like that. I would not recommend landowners it's a very expensive tool. It's a very expensive data. If you're looking, I think it's a previous question of, making sure you're getting a fair value and getting the right value for your property. The best way to do that is just what Jordan said, be as knowledgeable about your specific property as possible. Don't compare yourself to your uncle who got an offer 4 years ago, 5 years ago for solar leasing, and he didn't know what he was doing. But don't also compare yourself to, a guy with or a gal with 10,000 acres who's got 3 substations and 5,000 megawatts of capacity on their property, because they're not the same thing, right? Be as knowledgeable as possible about your property, put it in the marketplace, and see what the market is willing to do. Now that you have become educated about your property, it's a fundamentally different type of negotiation and transaction versus you coming off the street and saying, I have this thing and send me an offer, right? So we've gotten through it. I thank the 53 people that have stayed with me for almost 2 hours here. Wow, awesome. I'm going to go get a drink of water now, but I appreciate everybody for joining. Thank you so much. You guys will get a follow-up email to this, the recording. And please stay in touch. Let us know how we did. Any future topics that you guys might want to hear, send it to us and we will start digging into it. And we will talk with you guys in a couple weeks on the next one. So thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you. Michaela, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.